What's the matter? Are you all right? She told me she hadn't eaten in days when I questioned her. The woman's hair was in disarray, and her clothes were filthy. Her untidy hair obscured most of her face, giving her the appearance of a cursed ghost from a horror film. She also had a heavy body odor and hadn't taken a bath. She's homeless, I see. That makes sense, I suppose, but I had no idea that women might also be homeless. I was thinking of my father's advice as I was ready to pass her. Don't ignore people in need. Unaware that this could result in my losing my job, I paused and extended my hand to the woman. People are valuable. Constantly lend a hand to others and value the relationships you form. Never betray yourself, even if someone betrays you, and don't ignore someone who is in need. My father taught me that. I used to fight a lot as a kid. I grew up in a housing development where kids my age would frequently run around the vacant lots. Boys played baseball most of the time, and they frequently got into arguments with kids from adjacent areas about who may use the vacant lot. We used to settle disputes between youngsters on our own because parents didn't step in to break them up back then. But my father would say terrible things to me at dinner every time he learned that I had gotten into a fight. I wasn't very interested in what he stated when I was younger. My dad died of a disease when I was in upper elementary school. Those words have flooded back to me every time I pray at his altar ever since. As a memento and a manual for my life, I have taken my father's words with me. Despite having good marks in high school, I immediately started working after graduation because I was raised in a single-parent home with limited resources. I was employed by a large corporation due to my strong grades, which was uncommon for someone with just a high school degree. My mother was overjoyed that I had landed a job at such a large corporation after only completing high school. She had been feeble, but she appeared to get stronger when I offered her the position. Everybody else at my employment had graduated from either elite private schools or renowned national colleges. As a recent high school graduate, I didn't feel like I belonged, yet everyone appreciated my effort and commitment. I was given the chance to participate in a project as I kept up my hard work, and it ended up being a success. The project's senior leader, Kenneth, gave me credit for my work. He recognized the accuracy of my work, my analytical abilities, my attention to detail, and my document arrangement. Thanks to you, the project was successful, he added. You were a huge assistance to us. Thank you, he said, and conveyed his appreciation. In retrospect, I believe Kenneth's remarks were intended to inspire me even more. My manager, Tyler, then called me in and informed me that another project was underway, with a potential $30 million value if it were successful. I was brought on board to work on this new initiative. It was tremendously motivating to be chosen to participate in such a significant endeavor with my college-educated seniors, and I was overjoyed. I was determined to finish the project and catch up to the others, so I studied every day. The more I worked, the more results I got, and the more recognition I received, despite the fact that the organization was full of highly educated individuals. People are precious, always help one another, and cherish the bonds you make. Recalling what my father had said, I was really happy with the setting, where I was forming an increasing number of relationships through my employment. I didn't have a significant other, and ever since I started working for the company, my full attention has been on my work. One day, Tyler then revealed that a new employee would be joining the business. The newcomer, Kevin, was apparently a relative of Mr. Harrison, the president. A graduate of Tokyo University, he was also renowned for his extraordinary intelligence. Since he was a mid-career hire and far older than I was, I prepared myself to remain competitive. I had no idea how drastically my life would change with Kevin's arrival. I trained Kevin like a new hire when he started working there. To be honest, it felt strange because he was so much older than me, but I reasoned that it would be best to teach him properly so that he could pick things up quickly. I therefore went over everything with him. He didn't like being treated like a novice, though, and would frequently grimace as though to say, I don't need you to tell me that. I put up with his attitude while I taught him the work for a few months. Kevin received a promotion to section chief around 6 months later. He advanced through the ranks swiftly, as might be anticipated from a relative of Mr. Harrison. After a year, we switched places, and I was working beneath him. Wow, already a section chief, and he barely knows his job. I heard top staff members say things like that. Kevin was slow to learn, despite the efforts of his coworkers to teach him. Is he really a graduate of Tokyo University? Some even began to wonder about that. Despite its size, this business is family-owned. A few of the board members are Mr. Harrison's family. Kevin would, of course, eventually become one of them. Despite their frustration with his incapacity to understand the task, the senior staff reluctantly treated Kevin with respect because they did not want to lose their position in the company and understood that if news got to the board, it would mean the end of their careers. Kevin began assigning his own menial responsibilities to his subordinates as his status rose. As a manager, I'm too busy to deal with these pointless duties. Would you please enter this data for me, Kyle? He has been throwing all of his work at me lately. When other staff members seek him for help, he urges them to consult someone else because he never handles the specifics himself. He simply doesn't have the answers, to be honest. The senior staff abruptly transfers all of the work to me, his direct subordinate, with no intention of taking up Kevin's slack. They deftly stay out of the way. They are very astute in this regard. I foolishly take these assignments because I lack the calculation to avoid them, which adds to my already heavy workload. But even with all of these added duties, I still had to complete my primary obligations during regular business hours. I was always the one who took the blame when complaints came in. Kevin never accepted accountability. The individual who had done the work was invariably the one he moved it upon. This compelled me to further increase the precision of my own work. I discovered that my skill level had unintentionally increased as I spent my days immersed in work, and I developed a reputation inside the organization for being able to complete things accurately and swiftly. However, incapacity was not a justification for this enormous $30 million endeavor. Kevin would just respond, "Look, you're a high school graduate, so you handle it," when I tried to make time to help him catch up with the rest of the squad. In any case, you're quick at these stuff. Kevin, you won't be able to make accurate decisions when something goes wrong if you don't get involved in the work yourself, I would respond. You can stay up with the senior staff as the project develops if you get started right away. I gave him this advice out of charity, but he always found a way to avoid doing it. Rather, he was quick to join the senior staff at any social function or client meeting. Kyle, would you please review this document? With a broad smile, he would remark, I'm counting on you because I have a client dinner, hastily getting ready and heading out of the office with the others. The other team members would look at Kevin with skepticism as he left. Even staff members who had never met Kevin before began to inquire as the project went along, Kyle, is Kevin truly qualified to work on this project? Nothing seems to make sense to him. His credentials started to be questioned by more and more people. There wasn't even a resume on file for Kevin, and someone from another department who had joined the project claimed that he had been hired due to his familial connections to Mr. Harrison. Given how competent the senior staff was, Kevin's incapacity made him stand out among the others on the team. Because he was related to Mr. Harrison, no one dared to bring it to Tyler, even though normally someone like him would have been kicked off the project. In reality, Kevin wasn't given a lot of work to do on this project. He was really only a symbolic boss. Nevertheless, the team found it unacceptable that Kevin would just sit about and act arrogant. Even when the senior staff attempted to give him assignments, Kevin was unable to manage them, and they ultimately returned to me. As a result, the team began to severely question his qualifications from Tokyo University. One day, he started talking to Jacob, a senior coworker who had graduated from Tokyo University. I've heard that you received your degree from Tokyo University, Kevin. After all these time, it's good to speak with a fellow graduate. Jacob remarked nostalgically. I heard you passed on your first try. Impressive. Kevin first smiled in return, but his answers become more evasive when Jacob started inquiring about the department he was in and the instructors he had studied under. The whole Tokyo University graduate thing. It's something Tyler started saying on his own, he finally acknowledged. I didn't say that. Those of us in the vicinity who were listening weren't shocked. We were all disappointed to have our suspicions validated because we had all suspected as much. There were murmurs, is this a case of resumed fraud? However, Kevin had never explicitly stated that he was a graduate of Tokyo University himself, as Tyler had introduced him to the idea. Nevertheless, we had a project to finish, so we ignored Kevin and concentrated on the task at hand. I got up earlier than normal on the day of the client meeting to review the papers one last time. I wanted to make sure everything was in order because Kevin was supposed to show the client the documentation we had produced. I was taking a shortcut through a small park after purchasing a sandwich from a nearby convenience store when I noticed a woman lying on the ground. I rushed to her after stuffing the sandwich into my mouth. She was in a fetal position, curled up, gripping her tummy. What's the matter? Are you all right? I inquired. She claimed to have gone days without eating. She was a weak woman with a tangled mess of hair and dirty clothes. The majority of her face was hidden by her long hair, which was slung down her back. She had the appearance of a cursed ghost, something from a horror film. She also had a strong body odor and had obviously not taken a bath in a long time. I thought, oh, she's homeless. I guess that makes sense, but I didn't know women could be homeless too. Thinking there was nothing I could do, I was going to leave her there when I suddenly remembered my father's advice. Don't walk past someone in need. With the intention of giving her some cash so she could purchase some food, I paused and grabbed my wallet. But as I gave her a closer look, I saw that something wasn't quite right. She was breathing heavily, and I could see perspiration on her pale face through the tangle of her untidy hair. She appeared to be in excruciating discomfort. I concluded that she was ill, not just hungry. I thus dialed an ambulance. She struggled on while she waited for the ambulance. Despite her filthy look and heavy stink, I carefully lifted her up and placed her on a nearby bench because I couldn't just leave her lying on the ground. The paramedics hurried over as the ambulance finally pulled up, sirens blaring. They took her to the hospital after I gave them the rundown. I felt sad for her as they hoisted her onto the stretcher. I gave her all of the money in my wallet and instructed her to use it for her medical care. This is too much. I can't accept it, she began, but I turned her over to the paramedics before she could continue, and I walked out of the park. I heard her yell, "Wait, please," as I turned to leave, but I didn't turn around. The fear of being late for the client meeting consumed me. As I was walking, I looked at my watch and saw that I was already running late. I thought, damn, I'm going to be late too. I began running as quickly as I could. Breathless, I walked into the client's office, introduced myself, and told the receptionist why I was there. I rushed to the elevator after being told to go to the meeting room on the 12th floor. Although the elevator went extremely quickly and the building was 30 stories high, the ride to the 12th story felt very long, something I had never experienced before. The clients and my staff were already situated in the conference room when I arrived and knocked on the door, and everyone's eyes were on me. When they questioned why I was late, I told them about what had transpired in the park. Kevin didn't believe me, but my team did. Kyle, why in the world did you make the customer wait? A high school graduate is worthless because of this, he claimed. I lowered my head in apology, but Kevin continued his rant. You're not even able to arrive on time. I understand why you are unable to find a girlfriend. With that mindset, you will always be unmarried. And that hideous tie, really. Try to look respectable, at least. He persisted in disparaging me and bringing up other topics. At last, he scoffed. Aiding someone who was homeless? Create a better falsehood, at the very least. Homeless women aren't just lying around all over the place. I kept bowing and apologizing to the client while Kevin continued to scold me. Everyone had received their presentation materials by the time I got there, and Kevin was getting ready to start the presentation. Kevin's main responsibility as a manager was to provide the documents because he was incapable of handling their preparation. Something didn't feel quite right as I turned through the materials. Hold on, something is wrong. I thought, something's wrong. I began to fear as I was going over the documentation, but the client immediately saw the disparity and spoke up. Kevin, it appears that the materials we have in front of us don't match the presentation you're giving. Realizing this, Kevin took a quick look at the papers. Indeed, they were not the same as what he was showcasing. Only the areas I had been in charge of were incorrect, according to a closer look. Kevin bowed to the client and stated, "We sincerely apologize for the oversight in distributing incomplete materials." The customer said, "We'll need to think about it," in response to his request for an opportunity to rework the presentation at a later date. You can leave for today. It was unimaginable to make such a basic error at the start of a $30 million project. After leaving the client's office, our group returned to headquarters. "You're fired, Kyle. I wish to never again see your face. You shouldn't have been involved in such a significant undertaking as a high school graduate. How will you accept accountability for a $30 million deal?" I was completely confident in the contents because I had properly planned everything and reviewed my work. I couldn't have made such a basic error because I had only looked over the docs the day before. Not a single one of my coworkers spoke to me. They had all given up their time and energy to labor late into the night on this project, so it made reasonable. I sincerely apologized and bowed to the team, but they all turned to leave in silence and returned to the office. I couldn't have changed the documents on the spot because they had already been disseminated, even if I hadn't been late that day. Kevin told Tyler the meeting specifics back at the office. Afterwards, Tyler summoned me to his office and instructed me to take a break. I apologized profusely and walked out of the office. I continued thinking about getting fired while I was at home, soaking in the bathtub. I was most likely going to be fired, even though I had put a lot of effort into getting hired by this organization. I got in front of my computer after taking a bath and looked through job advertisements, but every one of them required a college degree. With only a high school degree, I was unable to employ my existing talents in any position. It's not possible, I imagined. I went to bed discouraged. My mom paid me a visit a few days into my leave. She was concerned after I told her what had transpired on the phone. "I prepared your favorite meal. Eat well and feel better." Before leaving for home, she reassured me, "I'll always be by your side, no matter what." I didn't want to add to my already heavy load or cause her any more anxiety. I decided to go out for a change of scenery the following day because I was feeling stuck in my room and it wasn't helping me. I left home the next morning, but strangely, I did so at the same time I typically leave for work. As I stepped outside, I thought, "Riley, my body remembers." It was very quiet on weekday mornings. The tranquility of a weekday morning let me realize how different the neighborhood felt as I walked the same path. Naturally, I followed my feet to the little park I frequently pass on my way to work. As I got closer to the bench, I noticed a woman sitting there, seemingly waiting for someone, even though I had intended to take a break there. There was only one bench in the park. I decided to keep walking and give up on sitting down after thinking, "Oh, someone's already sitting there." However, the woman abruptly got up and turned to face me as I was walking past. My breath caught in my throat as I looked at her. Her features were so remarkable that they nearly seemed otherworldly, making her the most gorgeous woman I had ever seen. I was shocked when she approached me and said, "I really appreciate your assistance the other day. I truly wanted to thank you in person, which is why I've been waiting here." Before me, she bowed deeply. "Oh, did I assist you in any way?" I couldn't remember ever being of assistance to someone so lovely. I remained silent for a minute, thinking, perhaps she's confusing me with someone else. She went on to say that I had phoned the ambulance when she passed out the other day. Oh, that day's homeless woman is you. It came to me at last. My name is Malign, the woman said. I introduced myself as Kyle and grinned uncomfortably in a moment of panic. Have you shed a few pounds? She inquired. Well, a lot has happened, I said hazily, attempting to dismiss it. Then, though, I felt compelled to tell her everything. She wasn't responsible for any of this after all. I should have double-checked the paperwork because I knew I was responsible for the confusion. But for some reason, I felt compelled to tell her how frustrated I was. I described what had happened that day, the document incident, and how I got into this predicament. Malign listened to my narrative, then glanced down and said, I'm so sorry, it's my fault, in a sobbing voice. I snapped back to reality when I saw the despair on her face. With a surge of self-loathing for bothering her with my problems, I asked myself, why did I tell her all of this? No, you are not to blame. I frantically tried to convince her that this was all my fault, but she continued to keep her head down. She slowly raised her head while I was second-guessing what I had spoken. We looked at each other for a moment. My pulse raced at the sight of her pure, lovely eyes. It's strange for your section chief, Kevin, to reprimand you like that in front of the client, she said. Based on what you've told me, I believe Kevin is suspicious. The fact that the documents you put so much effort into creating were abruptly replaced is incomprehensible. She listened to me and remarked that although I had no evidence linking Kevin to the incident, he seemed suspect. I don't think I could have moved the documents by accident, but I also don't have any proof that Kevin did it. I can't do anything but express my gratitude for your concern. Her face became more serious. Kevin did it, that much is certain. He most likely couldn't tolerate having someone with less education tell him what to do. There are many like him, particularly among the sons of affluent households, she asserted. Sons of wealthy families. She must come from a distinguished family, of course. She's out of my league, my mind said. Kyle, I'll assist you. Together, let's conquer this, she said, grasping my hand. As she squeezed it firmly, I just stared in bewilderment. I was certain that my face would have been a fiery red if I had a mirror. The company called me unexpectedly the following day and asked me to come in right away. I was instructed to go to the president's office as I hurried to the office. I rapped on the door and stepped inside. Inside, I noticed our client from the most recent meeting, Mr. Harrison, looking stern, and Kevin, looking pale. It was Malign, standing next to the customer. Mr. Harrison came over to me and began to talk. Both Tyler and your coworkers have told me everything. I now comprehend the circumstances. It's not your fault. Kevin was responsible for everything. I realized the reality as I glanced around at everyone's faces. Kevin was the one. He switched the papers. Mr. Harrison described the incident. Kevin was furious that a high school graduate had been chosen to be his mentor since he had joined the company through family ties. The thought of someone with less education ordering him was intolerable to him. He became enraged when he realized that I, a recent high school graduate, was involved in a $30 million project. In order to sabotage me, he devised a scheme to have me sent to a distant branch and derail the project by replacing just the documents I had provided. He had even offered his coworkers money to help him draft alternative documents, but they had all politely declined. Without anyone to assist him, Kevin had produced and disseminated the fictitious documents on his own. When some of his coworkers told Tyler about the incident, this information became public knowledge. Tyler was hesitant to tell Mr. Harrison about it, though, particularly because he lacked concrete proof. Kevin had assigned most of his job to his subordinates, thus he hardly grasped our company's structure. When the data for the fictitious reports was discovered undamaged following the restoration of Kevin's folder, The fact that he had improperly erased the papers became vital evidence. Mr. Harrison concluded his explanation, and then Malign spoke. She had heard my story the day before and understood that the transaction concerned her father's business and ours. She told her father how I had aided her and begged him to give me another chance when she returned home. Sensing that something was wrong, her father had asked Mr. Harrison to look into it, which is how Kevin's dishonesty was discovered. Hold on, she is the daughter of the client company's president, Mr. Hudson. I couldn't help but be overpowered by the circumstances as I listened. Malign trailed behind me as I left the room when the conversation was over. Then she gave me the whole tale. Her father had been adamantly pressuring her to marry a stranger in an arranged marriage. She rebelled and fled from home with no money, wandering aimlessly for days since she didn't want to marry someone she didn't feel anything for. To save herself from starving, she drank water from a fountain in the park. She finally had enough and passed out in the park, where I discovered her. Upon her admission to the hospital, the physicians determined that she had acute gastritis and stomach ulcers brought on by malnourishment and stress. She paid her medical costs with the money I provided her, but as soon as she left the hospital, her parents' hired searcher discovered her and took her home. She informed me she felt much better now and could even go back to her favorite BBQ. Malign wanted to express her gratitude to me face to face, so she had been waiting in the park every day during my regular journey. Mr. Hudson came up behind me as we were conversing. I made selfish decisions without taking my daughter's feelings into account, even though all I wanted was for her to be happy. I feel embarrassed. I'm grateful that you saved her. I would be thrilled to collaborate with you directly, he added, shaking my hand. After a brief moment of hesitation, I shook his hand. We lined and I started going out to eat after that, and soon we started dating. I couldn't resist asking her a question that had been on my mind one day when we were having lunch at a cafe. What made you volunteer to assist me that day? You may have simply said, "Thank you," and moved on. After giving me a serious look, she started to explain. I discovered the business transaction was with my father's company when I heard your narrative that day. I felt accountable for what had transpired as well. After hearing you, I was positive that you weren't at fault for the error. Therefore, I wanted my father to look into it and find out the truth. You were so lovely that I wanted to help you more than anything else. As a stranger, you helped me by taking me to the bench and even covering my medical expenses. Her face softened as she looked down shyly as she spoke. I found myself gazing at her in adoration and couldn't help but feel a strong fondness for her. Mr. Hudson's strong recommendation led to my appointment as the project's head, and I got to work advancing it. Some coworkers were jealous and remarked on how fortunate I was to be with someone so attractive after learning that I was seeing the client's daughter. However, they all applauded me and laughed, stating that it made sense in the situation. Recalling my father's advice, even if someone betrays you, never betray others, enabled me to let go of my hatred toward Kevin for what he did, but I would be dishonest if I claimed I didn't. After a while, Kevin was demoted and transferred to a distant branch, where he received the same retraining as new hires. He was left to live a lonely existence after his family and fiancée abandoned him, and his pay and bonuses were cut to match those of the newcomers. On the anniversary of my father's passing, my mother and I are currently driving to his burial. I want to let him know that Malign and I are engaged. My mother speaks abruptly as she silently looks out the window. I never thought all of this would result from that occurrence. There are many surprises in life. Looking up into the sky through the window, she whispers, "I'm sure your father is grinning down on us now." "Dad, you don't have to worry anymore." I mutter softly to myself while holding on to the driving wheel. I now realize that I caused Mom to worry and feel alone for a long time. Now that I've discovered someone I love, I'll keep her and Mom safe. You can relax, Dad. As I stared at the stunning blue sky outside the windshield, I muttered these words to myself.